Thank you, Nisha. Thank you for that wonderful start once again. Really appreciate it. I have a confession to make. While I sent invitation to all these industry biggies, today morning when I was getting ready, I was absolutely overwhelmed. I was like, this is the first time that we're getting into this industry, and here I have the who's who of this industry. But I'm absolutely humbled to see the camaraderie that these people share amongst themselves. And it has given me such confidence that I'm feeling, okay, this is going to be a nice session today. So thank you so much, gentlemen. Really appreciate each one of you's times. I know you are all very important people and you play a very big role as far as India's aerospace and defense segments concerned. So thank you so much. Without much ado now, let's get on with the discussion. The theme, as you all very well know, it is Atmanirbhar Bharat. And when I started my opening remarks this morning, I mentioned a quote from General Bipin Rawat, who said that from being the biggest importer of arms and ammunitions, it is time to move towards being a net exporter of weapons. So that is actually a huge paradigm shift that we are talking about here. India still is the biggest importer of arms, as we all know, but he is talking about becoming the net exporter of arms. Let me start off with Mr. Madhavan. That was also one of my problems here. I said, whom to start with? Because each one of you is big enough. So since Mr. Madhavan has spoken the least since the morning, I thought let me start with him first. So, Mr. Madhavan, how do you look at this particular vision? Do you think it is practical? Do you think India can reach that stage? And if so, what are the steps required to reach there? And what will be the kind of time frame that we can look at?
See, absolutely. I believe that we can become a net exporter from a present situation where we are importers of all the A&D stuff. So for that, the Atmanirbhar Bharat has to be looked into with more, what you call it as a enabler. And each one of us, every stakeholder has to believe in it first. And secondly, there should be a policy wherein we not only provide the goods, but also we have to put in money. The government also has to put in the funds for developing the systems and the platforms which are required in the future. So these are the two areas. And of course, it is driven by a government funding, but there is a backup. The Indian aerospace and defense sector has matured now, and there's nothing that can stop us from becoming the net exporter of goods from here.
Thank you, Mr. Madhavan. Since Mr. Madhavan spoke about the involvement of the private sector, let me come to Mr. Shukla. Mr. Shukla, uh, as very rightly pointed out, there is a need of corporatization of the aerospace and defense sector. So far, we know that it is predominantly ruled, if I could use that word, by the PSUs or the government-led companies. But we see that a lot of Indian private players, whether it is the Mahindras, whether it is the Godrej, whether it is L&Ts, and a lot of new companies are playing an important role here. How do you look at it as a private player, and do you see more and more corporatization happening of this segment?
First of all, let me place on record stellar record of some of our Navratnas. Hindustan Aeronautics, when I was growing up as a child, had done a wonderful job. I still remember it was 64, 65, I don't know, 66. HF-24, I remember still the picture of the plane which I saw. In those days, internet was not there in the magazine. The great job has been done, and they have inspired many a generation of our country. Same thing, BrahMos, 65% indigenization they have achieved in the country. BrahMos puts us among the handful of countries in the world who have done this. So we must not, under any circumstances, underestimate the contribution already made by public sector, and they have laid a strong foundation. Now, when a nation building happens, you begin somewhere, and a great job has been done by our PSUs. Same story when you talk about heavy engineering is repeated by BEML. Now, where do we go from there? Nation has done a great job by building an infrastructure, building a base. Generations of engineers have been inspired. As an engineer, when I was studying at IIT, in 70s, either people left India or they joined public sector. So please understand that value of public sector under no circumstances can be underestimated. Building on that foundation is what we are discussing next. Now, every industry for national interest, and I'm a nationalist first and foremost. For nation building, you need more than one company in every sector. What does that company do? It provides a larger funnel for technology absorption. It provides a larger funnel to be outside the restrictions. Otherwise, if you collaborate with American company, British company, Japanese company, sometimes they are concerned whether my technology goes from one place to another. What does corporatization achieve? It achieves several objectives. Number one, it creates a second pillar of manufacturing in the same sector. That creates competition between two very capable organizations. Always competition ensures that we strive to do better. So in sectors where we may have only one unit in India, do not worry about ownership. This ownership issue is not important here. What is important here? Do we have two players in every sector so that they compete with each other, work together, where the need be, they collaborate. In everything, you don't have to fight. You look at, I will not take names, but if you look at two large OEMs in America, it does not matter who wins which aircraft program. Very often, large part of it is also done by the other company in the same sector, and it is a normal practice because everything cannot be duplicated. At the same time, you need not have only one player in everything. Management bandwidth, a funnel to absorb technology, training of engineers, creating more engineers who can then fan out and create more companies in the sector, building of an ecosystem. So I'm a strong believer, and I have recruited God knows how many people from public sector, much earlier in telecom and IT. How do you think mobile companies of India were built? Recruiting people from MTNL and BSNL. How do you think oil companies of India were built? Recruiting from Indian Oil, Bharat Petroleum, Hindustan Petroleum. We need to now build upon a very strong base of technology infrastructure as well as manpower built over 50 years and say, can I create second pillar of manufacturing in national interest? Let us not think about ownership. It does not matter who owns a company. Ultimately, professionals run the company, not the owners. Whether it is HAL or BrahMos, it is qualified engineers and managers who run these companies, notwithstanding who's the owner. Owner may be government, owner may be private sector. Doesn't matter. I don't own the company. I'm a manager like Mr. Madhavan. I'm a manager like Dr. Mishra, Mr. Hota. I'm a manager like anyone else. Who owns it? How does it matter? We are all qualified engineers working towards a common goal. Can we make India self-sufficient in defense technology and defense manufacturing? As long as intent is right, bhavana is right, we will together succeed. It is together we will succeed. And I think that's the goal I set myself to. I work with that goal.
Thank you so much. I think you have analyzed it absolutely well. And by no way I wanted to downplay the role of the PSUs. Of course, we are what we are because of them. And as you very rightly said, they have already built a strong foundation for us. And it is time for us to develop over that foundation. Collaboration is the way forward. My next question is for Dr. Hota. Dr. Hota, I remember we had met in Ahmedabad December 2019, and we had a wonderful discussion there where you shared a lot of insights with me, and you told me that Niranjan, localization is the way forward whichever industry. It is not just about aerospace or defense, since BEML is also active in a lot of other segments, whether it is mining equipment, construction equipment, even railways and metros for that matter. So you said it is localization, that is what we'll have to focus on. And our honorable PM has also said that it is the right time to be vocal for local. So I would like to take a leaf from Mr. Shukla's point of view and build on that, saying that is collaboration really the way ahead? He gave a wonderful example of two American companies working in tandem. Is that kind of way forward for us? Will Indian companies really work in collaboration like that?
Absolutely. I think I'm glad you remembered that. While localization is very important, the other thing which I may have also said is having Indian designs, having Indian intellectual property. Because essentially what happens is we import something for some time and thereafter we move on to a new design. Consistency of the design so that local capacities and capabilities develop. Now you have issues like minimum order quantity, etc., etc. But I'll just take a leaf of what Shukla Saab said. PSUs, we ourselves in PSUs, we look down on PSUs. So that is a mindset issue we really need to come out with. The PSUs have served the purpose, but it's not time for them to move out. It's not that private sector has to take over the public sector. By the way, we are not government owned. We are shareholder driven companies. Government owns 54% of BEML, Bharat Earth Movers. And the reason why BEML was formed was those days it was born in the womb of Atmanirbharta. Things used to be imported. How do you build in reliance, indigenization, etc., etc.? So today the honorable Prime Minister's call of Make in India and Atmanirbharta is fantastic. It's really a shot in the arm. But of course there's many a slip between the cup and the lip, and these are issues that we have taken up. For example, I am the FICCI chair on public procurement. I have raised these issues with Secretary DPIT, Niti Ayog, to say that there are certain things which is actually not a level playing field. While the private sector says they want a level playing field, because earlier, we had got access to resources at throwaway prices. And I take the, blame that we have really not utilized our capacity to the extent we should. But there are a lot of issues which doesn't lead to a level playing field. Now these are issues which I think need to be addressed. I will not get specifically into those, but if you have time for that, I could. Now the other thing that Shukla Saab said, again I will take it from leaf from there. JR, Japanese Rail, we are a big player in the metro space in India. And you'll be surprised and shocked actually. A public sector like BEML has over 45% market share. And who are the guys we compete against? These are all the multinationals, the best in the world. 85% of all the business that BEML does is open competition. And that perhaps is a reason why we have been able to thrive in the marketplace. But I would say we have not been able to grow, because when competition of 85% is there, your margins tend to slim down. And we have companies which have a different strategy of pricing when they price it in India or when they sell it abroad. I would say in the coal industry and in the metro space, BEML's presence leads to thousands of crores of savings to the national exchequer. So collaboration is definitely the key. Having said that, I would say the PSUs need to really get out of their comfort zone. We have been in a comfort zone of sorts. Earlier, I used to work for Hindustan Petroleum. We have seen, when Reliance came in, we started losing market share. That's when we started realizing the importance of the look and feel of a retail outlet, the going to the customers. So there's a lot of stuff to be done. But I will just end on the note to say it's a fantastic trigger. Lots of work needs to be done. And Atmanirbharta, vocal for local, doesn't mean we're isolating ourselves from the rest of the world. We have to integrate with the rest of the world, because the most horrible byproduct, unintended consequence can happen is when we say we will do everything ourselves. Good heavens, no. And the last point on this Atmanirbharta is that of late the government has said anything which is to be imported less than 200 crores, we have to go and get approval. This doesn't apply to the private sector. MSME doesn't apply to private sector. Minimum local content doesn't apply to private sector. Now here I have 10,000 crore order book, and I have to go to the government for getting approval to import. I run into trouble. I'm sure Mr. Madhavan must be facing the same issue. Of course, these issues we have raised with the government and it is being addressed. But I will end on the note to say these are fantastic times, and all of us who are captains of the industry, I think there's huge amount of potential for all of us to make a difference. It's not about competing. It's about increasing the size of the pie. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hota. I think you've made a very valid point there. I think it is about working as Team India rather than looking at it as private sector versus public sector or Indian companies versus MNC, international MNCs. I think it is more to do with making India more robust as a defense power. Now, I'll be coming to Dr. Sudhir Mishra. The reason I'm coming to him now is because his organization is a fantastic example of this partnership. It is a partnership between an international, that is a Russian company, as well as an Indian company. And the way they have progressed, particularly over the last 5 years, it has been amazing. It is a case study in itself. In fact, every time we look at the newspaper, there is a news about BrahMos missile achieving a new milestone, which is amazing. And obviously, hats off to Dr. Mishra's leadership. We had the opportunity of honoring him with the Super CEO of the Year in the year 2015, and I think looking at the way he has progressed, he would have deserved it every year. So, Dr. Mishra, how would you look at this theme of partnership going ahead? And how do you look at this theme of partnership in the context of Atmanirbhar Bharat? Sir, I think you're on mute. I think Dr. Mishra may be facing certain bandwidth issue. Okay, that's absolutely fine. Dr. Mishra, are you there with us? Okay, never mind. So what we'll do is we'll come back to Dr. Mishra once he's online once again. In the meantime, I'll move on to Mr. William Blair. Mr. William Blair. Oh, Dr. Mishra is all. Was he here? Nevertheless, we'll continue with Mr. Blair now. Mr. Blair, Lockheed Martin is what it is, and it has been playing a very important role in the country. And you are all over the news because of the offer that you made with the F-21s, which is enticing to say the least. So you heard the captains of the Indian industry so far speak. So I would like to give me, I'd like you to give me your perspective on their viewpoints and how do you look at it as an international organization?
No, that's great. I appreciate the opportunity, and hopefully I'm clearly audible to you. I appreciate actually the comments and reconnecting with some old friends over this program as well. My perspective is really built on many years of working in India. I first came to India in 1996, working in the power generation sector, marine gas turbines and aeroderivative gas turbines. Then I came back in 2005 to 2008 when civil aviation was booming. And then last was in 2010 to 2012, 13 timeframe in the defense domain, and now back for the last year. And I have to say that one of the panelists made the comment of how the aerospace and defense ecosystem has truly matured in the last 10 to 15 years. I think it's incredible. So there's a tremendous foundation that's in place. My earliest memories were working with HAL. And HAL, I think, continues to build marine gas turbines under license with GE, and also working on the light combat aircraft with the engines powering that. And it's come so far. It's really quite incredible. And so that's a testament, I think, to the comments that were made about the innovation and the leadership that is wholly inclusive. It's in the defense public sector units, but I've also seen it in the private sector units. 10 years ago, when we were talking about the first round of the MMRCA, we were hosting supplier conferences, hosting hundreds of suppliers, many of them aspiring to transition from what was automotive sector that had already boomed in for the private sector, and seeing those opportunities for an investment in defense. Those companies made those investments. They've grown tremendously, some through partnerships, but many, I would say, organically, just through the sheer innovation capability and drive to be successful. From Lockheed Martin's perspective, we established two joint ventures 10 years ago. One in it's called Tata Lockheed Martin Aerostructures Limited. The other Tata Sikorsky Aerospace Limited. And I think there are two great case studies to help answer maybe the question. In the C-130J, it was set up because of out of opportunity, not obligation. It wasn't an offset requirement. Lockheed Martin saw a tremendous opportunity and started building center wing boxes and empennages for the C-130J. Till date, they've delivered over 130 empennages to meet the global supply chain requirement. There's no other company providing it, and they increased quality and delivery reliability when they transitioned that work to India at that time. And now it's up to over 85% indigenization. So it wasn't, let's import components into India. It was, okay, we've got this, now let's extend it. And so with over 85% of the components being produced here in India, it's tremendously successful. Similarly, the Skorsky venture started out with aerospace components and building S-92 cabins, delivering over 154 cabins now. And but what's stunning, if you get a chance to see that facility, and I'm a design engineer in aircraft engines, that's how I grew up as a mechanical engineer. 10 years ago, it was really quite remarkable, the level of capability. And now they're producing aircraft engine components in addition to helicopter components, so rotating parts and structural parts. And so just to kind of, my point is that there's this counterbalance now that's been built up. The private sector has really come up in the last 10 years. And oftentimes, you know, you hear about the very large private sector companies as well as the large, very large defense public sector units. But those the examples that I shared are feeding down to 240 suppliers, over 240, many of them MSMEs and startups. And we have over 70 that are feeding into our global supply chain. So I think with that foundation, the future is very bright. And again, there's diversity and it's inclusive. And so when we talk about defense public sector units, I appreciate the association with HAL, also Bharat Dynamics Limited. We're working together to try to work transfer of technology and production of Javelin. We've had discussions with BEML. There's tremendous opportunities, I believe, both in the with the defense public sector units and in the private sector. And I think it's important to have that inclusive growth. The last comment, I think there was Mr. Madhavan kind of led off, and you talked about being a net exporter. I believe we can get there. I think having the offers we have for the fighter, the F-21, helicopter, the NUH, that translates to tremendous opportunities, not just to meet India's requirements, but also to meet a global need and requirement. We've already started the production of fighter wing assembly down in Hyderabad. That's well in advance of any real requirement that we can directly meet, say, with an F-21 offer. But then it could tie into really a $165 billion ecosystem globally. So I think there's tremendous opportunity for us in India to be a center for maintenance, repair, and overhaul, and bring that work back into India that is otherwise aircraft or helicopters that are flown out to be serviced. And I think it's proven in the civil sector that we can make it happen. And I think there's tremendous opportunity in the between the DPSUs and the private sector to build up that MRO capability. And I think public-private partnerships are going to be important because we need to see, you know, you mentioned, one of the panels mentioned minimum order quantities. The business case has to be there. It's there for MRO. It needs to be there for raw material as well. We would love to source and process raw material to increase our indigenous content. And frankly, it's necessary that we do that. But generally, countries do that through public-private partnership models because it takes a tremendous amount of investment, and it requires a consortium of companies to come together to see what is that total requirement, whether it's aerospace grade aluminum, titanium, or specialty metals. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Blair. I think it was quite refreshing to hear your viewpoints on this particular subject, and I really appreciate the way you took the comments of the other panelists and addressed them from your point of view. Thank you so much for that. Let me get back to Dr. Sudhir Mishra, who's online with us once again. Sorry, Dr. Mishra, you got dropped out due to the bandwidth issue. But my question remains the same. How do you look at these partnerships going ahead in the light of the Atmanirbhar Bharat campaign?
Integration of technology is always a challenge. Bluetooth is one more technology element.
Now am I audible?
Absolutely, sir.
You are, because you
Yeah.
removed one technology element.
I'm very sorry, Niranjan, for the confusion. And again, it's so nice to be back with all the co-panelists. You see, when it comes to Atmanirbhar Bharat, it's more than a slogan, more than a campaign. It's a spirit that we should try to produce maximum possible in our country. And this word Atmanirbhar, it touches the many facets of technology, is right from research and development to manufacturing to finances to export, our indigenous consumption. So I would touch upon the research and development, then to the joint venture partnership, and then to export. I think, Niranjan, that would suit a organic monologue. Okay. Now, you see what happens in our country. It's a very typical that defense research and development has been in the government domain. And lately, we have, I don't call it a public sector because they are now public listed companies, HAL, BDL, BEL. So they are out of the government control. But largely, they take guidance and you can say, the directions still from the government. I hope that over a period of time, this control also would lose, and public would be able to influence their financial achievements and course. Now, DRDO has been, it's having a mixed bag of success. You see, we conduct many tests, but the tests should lead to manufacturing. It should lead to induction into the services. Now, here, the public sector undertakings and DRDO, they should have a very close partnership. Till now, DRDO has been developing technology, giving it to public sector or private sector almost free of cost. It shouldn't happen. What I feel that the way the BrahMos is a joint venture between DRDO and NPOM, between India and Russia, we should have similar joint ventures between DRDO and our companies, whether they are in the Mahindras, Tatas, or HAL. You see, if DRDO take the responsibility to develop the LCA, light combat aircraft, or MCA, and HAL says that we will manufacture when we get the order, or and there is no synergy. The synergy is in the finance. The synergy is not in the technology. Whereas I feel that HAL has got tremendous manufacturing technologies in the whole world globally. Aerospace sector has been leading manufacturing agents and change agents in the manufacturing technology. They can take the lead and come out with a joint venture with DRDO. Maybe it's a new way of thinking, but we can always copy it from the BrahMos. We need to just replicate it. The second thing is the kind of manufacturing capability we have created in our country in the private sector, public sector, and small scale, medium scale industries. It's a huge. I'm sure, like other CEOs. I interact with many these industry leaders, CEOs, and they always say that we are running our plant at maybe 20%, 40%, 50% capability. There is a enormous latent manufacturing capability available. Now, unless we develop the customers globally, we will not be able to generate the wealth. Now, here comes the role of the research. A research and development in itself is of no use unless it leads to generation of revenue. Now, here is a big lacuna. We have been doing research in their own domains, in their own verticals, but this research is not getting leading to the generation of revenue.
I always tell my colleague that a research without revenue generation potential is not worth doing. Please don't do it. We are not into the blue sky research. We are into the applied research, industrial research. It should lead to a product which can generate a revenue. Now, here we are lacking. More than this is the role of government. I remember when India wanted to buy a LRSAM, I will not say buy, or co-develop LRSAM, MRSAM missile system. Israeli Prime Minister used to be in India, in Delhi, every other month. Even for anti-tank guided missile, he was coming here and trying to seek the appointment with Defense Minister, Defense Secretary, Prime Minister to push his products. Now, are we doing this? Do we have such plans? The government will have to play such kind of roles if we have to export. The second thing is, although we have our own, but are they established, time-tested, or properly audited mechanisms, procedures, structures which will promote the export of the weapons? I don't think so. They need to be made more user-friendly, and it is not only the interest of a particular company that we should export. There is a trickle-down effect of export. There is, if the business is of 1,000 crore, this 1,000 crore will lead to at least 5,000 crore of business in the coming 5 years. So we are losing all this. Lastly, India has been playing the import of weapon system as a means of diplomacy, as a means of making the big countries happier. As long as we do that, we will not be able to develop our defense technology. We will not be able to export, and we will be limited to. You see, I don't have any disrespect to the body armor or a simple vehicle. They are, a lot of technology goes into that also. But when it comes to high technology, like exporting an aircraft or a missile system or a tank or a submarine or a warship, we will not be able to be successful there. And the cream lies there only. The defense technology can be divided into, the human-centric, the sensors, platforms, and weapons. So if we are only into the human-centric technology, the revenue generation will not be much. And if we look back, in the 1980s, our country decided to get into the information technology because it was not a capital intensive industry. And we became master in that information technology. We again have reached to the maturity level of 7%, 8% in the service sector. Beyond that is not possible. We are not into, again, the high tech of information technology. China decided to be in the manufacturing sector. Today, they are factory of the world. And if we have to become factory of the world today, because the opportunity is knocking at our door, the whole world is having animosity with China due to various reasons. We will not get into that. But there is a very adverse, face of China in front of rest of the world. People are friendly towards India. We should encash this opportunity. We should try to, but the objective should be to generate the revenue. The whole political system, the bureaucratic system, scientific, industrial, we all have to come together and try to generate the revenue. Always remember, when I was reading financial management course at IIT Chennai, we call it IIT Madras, the first thing my professor told me, that you don't do anything which doesn't generate revenue. You do only the things which can be counted on your fingers or can be deposited in the bank. And although I am a government officer, I'm a government scientist, but still in the BrahMos, I try to do only those things which generate wealth, revenue. I don't do anything which is wasteful. Many things I told, they may be disconnected, but I felt like telling. Thank you, Niranjan.
Thank you, Dr. Mishra, for opening your heart to us. I think it was very revealing, and it was very important that we also see the ground realities while we talk about the future vision. So, thank you so much for sharing that with us. I'm sure the rest of the panelists would kind of react to your statements when I gave a turn to them. Right now, I want to go back to Mr. Madhavan. Mr. Madhavan, when I came to know about Hindustan Aeronautics Limited when I was in the school, and the way I realized the importance of this organization, I described it in one of the essays that I wrote in the school. The initials of Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, HAL. I said this is the hull, hull which means a plow, and it also means the solution. I said this is the hull for India's aerospace and defense segment. So I would like you to respond to Dr. Mishra's commentary right now. The most important point that he mentioned here is that research needs to be driven by revenues. So I would request you to respond to that. And I also have another question for you. The question being that it is very important to talk about the aerospace and defense ecosystem that we have. And it is not just about the large companies. It is not just about the big players here. It is also about the small and medium enterprises. And HAL has done a lot of hand holding for a lot of these companies. So I would also like you to talk a little about that as well. Dr.
Yeah.
Madhavan.
First of all, I should congratulate Mishra for his views on how to go forward as far as Atmanirbhar program is concerned. He touched upon a couple of points which I'd like to bring out. So one of them, what he said, was the collaboration between a research organization like DRDO versus the industry. In fact, for all your information, this information, I would like to say that the AMCA project, we are going in the same direction as what it was for BrahMos. There will be a joint venture between DRDO, HAL, and the private industry. So that's so that the manufacturing activities are done concurrently along with the design by this joint venture company. So that is one of the things. Second thing is, as far as when you have to export and when you have to have a bigger, say, increase the size of the pie, as somebody else was telling earlier, this research and development definitely has a major role to play. Not only developing a product, but developing it in time. Because now the technologies are changing so fast that by the time you bring a product in online and make it ready for the services, the product might have been already obsolete or outdated. So doing the R&D and then concurrently producing it at a faster pace is what is required as of now. For this, HL, of course, has changed its outlook. We are trying to bring in concurrent engineering. We are bringing in model-based system engineering, and at the same time getting into Industry 4.0. All our new plants are going to be designed for that. So this is how we plan to reduce the cycle time between the R&D to the end product delivery. In the process, we feel that we should now transform ourselves into a lead integrator only, design plus lead integrator role, and also provide the customer services to the forces. And the rest of the work is to be done by the partner vendors, for which HL has been doing this exercise for last more than a couple of decades. And we have more than 2,400 vendors in the MSME sector, even in the large scale sector, who are supplying the sub-assemblies to our final assembly lines. So they have now come up matured. They have come up in the size as well, size of operations, and they are, and as well as technologically, that they can take over a large amount of the manufacturing activities. Everybody has been talking about the infrastructure, the manufacturing infrastructure and technology of HAL. Yes, how much of it is relevant as of now is something to be asked. I'm not very happy with all those old technologies that we are still going along with. And there are lots of old platforms with our defense forces which are still in service. So these are certain areas where we have to see how we can modernize that, bring in the new technologies, bring in the new ways of manufacturing, like additive manufacturing. There are so many new changes in the material technologies that has to be built in, and automation. At the same time, also the manpower which uses these technologies. So a manpower development program. These are the areas that we are now looking at it, so that in future we have the right technologies for manufacture. We have the most efficient way of doing it, and also have the manpower, which the skills with our manpower to handle these future projects. As far as MSMEs are concerned, they are they are the backbone for our supplies. In fact, almost all the manufacturing are now being done by them, including to the stage of making the fuselages. In fact, in LCA, all the main fuselages, as well as the wings, the rudder, everything is being done by the vendors, and it only comes into the factory for the final assembly, the equipping, the ground test, and the flight trials. So that's only things that we are doing it. Other things are, everything is given off to the vendors. So the manufacturing base, if an aircraft is produced, the manufacturing base of that, about 40% of it is coming from the vendors. So that is how the industry survives if there is an order on the LCA. So MSMEs have, from earlier days when they were only doing production to the blueprints that we are supplying, now they are in a position to develop their own systems. There are some of them who are giving us directly, especially in the electronics and avionics sector, they are giving directly the end systems with us. So they have developed quite a bit in India. At the same time, from what HL was about a decade back to what it is now, there's a huge difference. The way we work is changed. That's because of increased competition also coming in, and also we are now looking at more of exports rather than only looking at our defense budgets, because defense budget is a restricted thing as of now, because the growth you cannot achieve the growth that you are expecting only dependent on the Indian defense budget. So we are now looking at things and avenues outside of the defense budget, including exports, which is the way forward, because then only our plants and our vendors' plants can be kept humming.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. I think you raised a very important point. If I have to highlight one key issue here, is the modernization that we need to do aggressively here. Dr. Hota, my next question is to you. When I spoke about corporatization in the beginning, what I also implied is that it is important for the public sector companies to change the guard and become more corporatized. Dr. Mishra also mentioned that most of these companies today are publicly listed. So the move towards that has also happened. My question to you is that, is there a scope for the aerospace and defense segment to learn from the other manufacturing sectors? We have the automotive industry in India, which is evolved like anything. We have the other segments also that have also evolved a lot. So is there something that we can learn from them? Of course, the aerospace and defense sector is extremely sophisticated, advanced in its own. But is there something that we can learn or copy from the other segments as well? I ask this question to you because you deal in other segments as well.
See, actually, in the case of BEML, since we have the rail and metro, coal and steel, metro, then we have defense, aerospace. What happens is the bandwidth of the CEO of BEML gets stretched. If I was the CEO of an oil company, I would have Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas to deal with. Now, no matter what we say about being a shareholder-driven company, there are a lot of things that we have to do because of government interfaces. Now, coming to your question of aerospace, I think there's a lot of sympathetic resonance between the aerospace industry and the automobile industry and the overall, the kind of space that we are in. For example, there was a point made about R&D has to be driven by revenues. It's very easy to say, but when you make a product for the first time, I mean, I can share with you from experience. We made a 200-ton dump truck. This is the first time that in the country, an indigenous company, indigenous design, we were making it. In the world, there are 4 or 5 companies which make it. The product is made, fantastic product. Coal India says very good product. However, I cannot buy it. Why? Because it's not proven. Now I'm just born. How can I prove myself? So those are issues which has to come in. From there, I will get to the point of national facilities. Even if you create a lot of these aerospace facilities, unless the capacity is utilized, we will not be addressing the basic question that Dr. Mishra raised. We cannot get the revenues. Now, national facility, for example, BEML was the first company to have made a rail coach in the country. After that, ICF, RCF, MCF came. There is a cabinet noting to say that national facilities has to be all utilized. However, today we are not getting rail coach orders. However, it doesn't matter. We have moved to some other things. Consistency of order. The Japanese rail example, which I couldn't give in my earlier, when I spoke, JR has a fantastic model. It is not the winner takes it all. All the companies in the ecosystem, everyone is given depending on the capacity they have, depending on the pricing, and the JR decides to give to Kawasaki, to Hitachi, to other companies. Here, it is the winner takes it all. So we have a lot of spare capacity. I remember when I was not getting rail coach orders and I knocked my way right up to PMO office, I was fired by, I won't name, by somebody in PMO to say, why did you not come to us earlier? How can national facilities go waste? So coming back to your point, creating facilities is damn good. But you have multinational companies who make door systems for us, which we use in our metro. But when I have to buy, it is that company's Chinese branch which quotes a better price. Now, is it really made in India? I don't know. So these are some of the issues we need to look at. And the last point I want to make is there are a lot of fantastic opportunities for us, but it's a mindset issue. We are only looking at being taken over by multinationals. We are not looking at going and buying. There's a lot of spare capacity in the defense space. There was a time when earlier defense secretary had asked us for a list. East European countries, a lot of defense facilities are there waiting to be taken up. Now, can the PSUs get together or tie up with the private sector? Because they bring in the agility. No matter what the private sector brings in the agility. On the export bit, I would say that even in the line of credit, what happens is if you have to export to, say, Bangladesh, we are put in category C. And there are countries which are put in category A and B. So you can never export earth moving equipment or your metro. If there is a line of credit, the definition of Indian company has changed. Definition of Indian companies, anybody who has anything in India is an Indian company. Now, there are issues there. So capacity, for example, if you look at BEML, we have spare capacity. We are the ones who made the first main battle tank. But for whatever reason, it went to OFB for being manufactured. But today, even if something is imported, we have been telling the government that let us support OFB instead of importing from Russia. So we are at the moment, I'm proud to say we are developing the 1500 horsepower engine for the main battle tank, the futuristic one. So these are spare capacities that we have. So coming back to your question, aerospace, yes, we need to invest. Today, it may look like down in the dumps, but there is a lot of sympathetic resonance with the rest of the economy. There's a lot of, I would say, trigger to the others. And India has a lot of manpower, which I think can be gainfully utilized. I will end on that note and thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Hota. Mr. Shukla, I would want you to respond to Dr. Hota's point here, particularly on two issues. One is, can the private sector really come together with the PSUs and become a little more aggressive when it comes to looking at inorganic development of the sector? Number one. And number two, line of credit is a big issue for this industry because without money, you cannot move ahead, no matter how fantastic products you have or no matter what the need of the country is. So Kindly share your viewpoints on that.
I have always believed that public-private partnership is the way in many spheres. There are areas where standalone works, and there are areas when you work together. Since you mentioned, it's a well-known fact that with HAL, we have an agreement for a particular aircraft category to bid for in future. These things have been part of our philosophy and belief of working together. So on that, I have no ambiguity. I agree with Dr. Hota that this can be done and this should be done. Agility is what private sector brings in decision making, without any doubt, without any ambiguity. Plus, one more factor, which is risk-taking ability. Very often, an entrepreneur is able to take risk which otherwise are difficult to be taken by someone who may be looking for direction from the government. It is not about the individual concerned who's sitting in the chair, but if he has to take direction from the government, certain risk-taking ability becomes difficult, which an entrepreneur can give direction to professional manager in his company. Okay, you take the risk. If something goes wrong, don't worry. There is no CR being spoiled for you. Because we know that you are knowingly taking a risk. When you launch a satellite, when you launch a rocket, there will be one or two failed attempts. You cannot hang somebody because there was a failed attempt or two. When we were working on our 10-seater turboprop aircraft, Mahindra is the only private sector company which has designed and built and sold aircrafts in more than 35 countries. Well, our first aircraft did not come up to the standard and it had to make an emergency landing. Parachutes opened, so structure was saved, but fact remains it had an emergency landing. When you make something first time, you have to take risk and there has to be an acceptance of failure in the culture of the organization. Now, this is the biggest thing which in Mahindra Group we have built. Acceptance of failure when you take risk. In fact, I'm chairman of 9 or 10 companies in the group. I had introduced Failed Innovation Award in the Innovation Award category. So we have product innovation, process innovation, business model innovation, but the fourth is the most important, failed innovation. And that award I personally come on stage to give. And the Failed Innovation Award is given to the person who says, I tried this, it did not work. He stands on the stage and says, what did he learn from that failed innovation? Because that learning will lay the foundation for the next innovation. Everything you may not begin with R&D. Sometimes you begin with joint venture. We had a joint venture with an American company to make radars. Within 5 years, our partners in America trusted us enough and said, you build the next version of the same radar which you've been building, entirely given to us to build. That's a big vote of confidence in Indian engineers and Indian technologists, that they can now build upon something, a radar which might have been originally built 20 years ago. Now let us go to next generation. We work, and that same radar is used on many platforms. Some of them built by HAL, but many platforms use it. Even what is imported into India, that will have the radar of built here. Now, to make a beginning, you need something to begin with. I'm a great believer in evolution. The beginning can be made in public sector when no private sector company is there. I always give the example of Ashoka Hotel and Samrat Hotel to people. In early 50s, when Afro-Asia conference was to be held, the best hotels were in Calcutta, Bombay, and one or two in Chennai. Delhi did not have any 5-star hotels. So Nehru decided that we'll build Ashoka and Samrat, because Afro-Asian conference, when it was to be held, first conference post-independence. Today, we have many chains which have come up, which have world-class hotels. We are talking now 70 years later. Everything is relevant to a point in time, and we cannot say what was done was wrong without understanding the context of those days. Same thing is true for steel industry. You have to make a beginning somewhere. Similarly, now, for example, there is a strategic partnership model which Government of India has introduced. A beginning has to be made. Beginning can be made under license, which many public sector units did when they manufactured under license, and gradually achieved Atmanirbharta in those particular categories. Same thing is strategic partnership model, which has been introduced by government, where Indian private sector company and a global OEM collaborate in a joint venture and create a Make in India program. So in the beginning, technology provider will be a global OEM. Now you make a start from there, and we see the future that once we have a collaboration, be it aircraft, be it helicopter, any field, be it submarines, now the joint venture should be able to make for the world. And that is the joint venture where there is an Indian company, perhaps private sector company, and the government and the global OEM. Now this is built making for the world, making in India for the world. What does it do? The model is no different. Very often we get lost in ownership. Model is the same whether you make under license from a global OEM or you bring him as a JV partner and now you make it together. You don't start from zero. You don't invent the wheel. You don't invent the fire. You say that I'm making a beginning from this point where industry has already come in the world of technology, and now I go from here. What does happen? Partner brings technology. India provides the scale as well as economies in manufacturing. So economies of manufacturing and scale can be provided, and technology comes in. That is an unbeatable combination. All our partners have realized that combination actually can be the base not only for that global OEM, not only for that private sector company. No, we are going beyond that. That becomes a base for exporting to rest of the world as cost competitiveness is becoming more and more important. Economies of scale are becoming more and more important. And there the like-minded countries, like-minded corporations will come together. This will happen more and more. I call it collaboration as well as competition. While Mahindra Aerospace makes its own small plane, it's not in the category of Boeing, Airbus, Lockheed, no. But a 10-seater is approximately the same size as a fighter plane. But at the same time, we also make parts, components, sub-assembly, and we take pride in saying, if you see something flying, there is Mahindra inside. Now, that may be a small component, small part, small sub-assembly, but we take pride in that. US is our large customer. Europe is our large customer for parts and components. So in one category, you compete. In another category, you are actually a supplier. Ecosystems co-compete, collaborate. That is philosophy more and more. How did defense and aerospace develop? I will take 1 minute on that. After the Second World War, winners created UN as well as winners created Security Council. Winners had 5 permanent seats. If you see the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, they all have their own strong defense and aerospace industry. Losers of the war had similar industries before, Japan, Germany, and Italy. But after losing the war, certain restrictions came on what they can do and what they cannot do. So you find Japan, Germany, and Italy do not have aerospace and defense industry of the nature which winners of the world for Second World War have. So when you look at the structure of the industry for the world, and forgive me, but I do like to bring conceptual clarity to practical concepts. When you see them together, you see the rationale and logic of things. If you look at today's industry, 5 continue to lead in defense and aerospace. Plus, there are supporting industries which exist in Germany, Italy, and Japan. The new players which came into this sector were first and foremost Israel. Very often, your incentive, your motivation, your inspiration comes from your neighbors. Neighbors are the best source of inspiration for any country. You can choose friends, but you cannot choose neighbors. So Israel had no choice but to develop its industry. And today India is in a situation where we have no choice to be Atmanirbhar because of the neighborhood we live in. And we will not be able to change that neighborhood. Sometimes we get lost in many debates, sometimes on economics, sometimes on technology, sometimes on job creation, sometimes on profitability. But at no point we can forget that we have a neighborhood, and that neighborhood requires us to be Atmanirbhar, at least in defense and aerospace. Now, it cannot be very often officially stated in so many words by many people in leadership positions, but that is a reality which we have to accept, and therefore we will have to strive towards Atmanirbhar Bharat and then see how do we make other factors fall in line. Other factors have to fall in line towards Atmanirbhar Bharat. We cannot be saying because of this region we cannot be Atmanirbhar Bharat. So it is not about why we cannot do something. It is about how and why we can do something. And this is what our focus should be. I look at all industry as a whole, my friends in global industry, and I have largest number of partnerships in the world. In India, I have partnerships in aerospace, in radar, in aircraft, in helicopters. We have largest number of partnerships in the area of training and development. Lockheeds are my good partner. Every time you see the planes, Lockheed transport aircrafts flying to Ladakh or taking supplies, dropping supplies in Siachen. Pilots have been trained by Mahindra Lockheed joint venture. There are partnerships global. There are partnerships with public sector. It is one ecosystem. When I make a vehicle, there are 200 small and medium scale companies which supply parts. I will give you the simplest example because it is from civilian sector. I'm at liberty to speak. When Mahindra makes a Scorpio, there are 2 suppliers. Supplies the glass, somebody supplies the headlight back, somebody supplies the tail light, somebody the steering wheel, the brake assembly, the seat cover. I can go on listing the windscreen wiper, wheels, wheel hubcaps, tires, tubes. There are 200 suppliers for one Scorpio. When we talk aircraft, when we talk armored vehicles, there are even more complex assembly lines. We are used to being an integrator for decades. When you talk a large company, you cannot talk without small and medium. And when you talk small and medium, you cannot talk without a large company. Small and medium companies depend on large companies and vice versa. I may be OEM in one area and I may be supplier in another. HAL has had tremendous progress in making engines, and we know that, and I compliment them on that. That was a need of the hour because in India nobody made engines. But if they have engines, and if I have to make a product, if it is available in India, why would I not buy from HL? There are things where you compete in one area, and at the same time, you buy from the same competent organization in another area. These things go hand in hand. I believe we have to build a strong ecosystem. Same thing in BrahMos. A lot of supplies come from private sector. lot of collaboration happens with a foreign country. I believe more and more we will get integrated into global supply chains. More and more global OEMs will get over the issue of making in India. They need not worry. There are some very reputed companies where your IP is safe, your technology is safe. As an engineer, I know how many years it takes to develop technology. An engineer inherently respects technology. He knows what it takes. It is not about accounting. It takes years of effort, billions and billions of dollars to develop technology, and we respect. Once you know you are dealing with companies where IP will be protected, I think partnerships, collaborations, joint ventures will be the order of the day, where you find a partner who will protect your technology, respect the technology, and give you value for technology, not want it just like that. These are the things which matter. And I believe India is off to a good start. Generation of people like us, we waited through 70s, 80s, and we did not leave the country. Not many, 80% of my classmates from IIT left India. I'm on those 20% who stayed. We waited decades that we will get to do things which we learned and not be making soap and shampoo. I think this generation is waiting to do things. You have the right leadership, timing is right, opportunity is right, moment is right. And India has opened up to countries through partnerships with world powers, global powers. Those relationships are going to be the foundation of our partnership. I'm a strong believer in that. Nobody can convince me about the bottlenecks. Every bottleneck, every roadblock is to be overcome. I don't see a reason not to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Shukla. That was a bit longish, but it was quite educative, and truly appreciate you for sharing that. We have actually run out
I'm
of
sorry.
our
I'm
time.
sorry for the longish.
We have actually run out of the time, and the time for the next session has started. But I am still tempted to have one last question for Mr. William Blair. Mr. Blair, I have a few minutes for you. If you could just respond to 2 points here. One is I take a cue from Dr. Mishra's comments when he said that India has been using the aerospace and defense sector as a tool of international diplomacy, where the focus has been to please certain large countries. So I want you to respond to that because it is a very important point that he has raised here, and you represent the US. In fact, I would quickly share with you that we conducted a small poll for our delegates, and we asked them which country is the best partner for India's aerospace and defense segment, and we gave them the choices: Russia, USA, France, and Israel, and others. Surprisingly or not surprisingly, the answer, most of the people said US. So I would like you to answer to that quickly in about a couple of minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. I think first and foremost, it's about capability. The Indian services, whether it's the Air Force, Army, or Navy, Coast Guard, they're looking for the best capability because as one of I think it was Mr. Shukla was talking about, you can't choose your neighborhood. You need to have a capability advantage versus your adversary, and a capability advantage in terms of reliability and availability and supportability. And so I think there's been I think these have been essentially competitive procurements. I know the services have looked in to see whether it was a single vendor procurement or a competition, what is the best capability that they can procure. And so I think that's true with the C-130J, and it has the highest availability of any aircraft in the Indian Air Force fleet. And so what does that translate to? It translates to affordability because you don't have to maintain as many aircraft to meet your operations requirements. Recently, the MH-60 Romeo was selected. Again, that's a foreign military sale, a single vendor procurement to meet a very critical ASW anti-surface requirement for the Indian Navy, and unmatched, best in class, unmatched capability and multi-mission capability that platform can deliver. And so again, I think that decision was made again based on an urgent need and capability. But I think the U.S. is also, Lockheed Martin included, has demonstrated that we're a committed partner through the joint ventures that we set up, through the work that we're putting in India that I spoke about earlier on the panel. What does that mean? That means not just fulfilling offset obligations. It really was created out of opportunity. If you look at over the last 5 years, exports from India in aerospace and defense, 22% over the last 5 years are going to the U.S., 12% to France, and then I think single digits, low single digits to Russia and Israel. And so you're not just, India's not just buying, what they feel is in each case the best capability, but I believe U.S. and U.S. companies are following through on their promise through FDI and really translating investments to capability indigenously building up the defense and aerospace ecosystem, but making the business case work because that's translating to exports as well. So I think it comes down to capability, partnerships built on trust, and delivering on promises, whether it's meeting our offset obligations or really growing exports, which is critical. You look at the 2025 goal of $5 billion in exports. I think when we look at the fighter and the helicopter and other platform opportunities, you can see your way towards achieving those goals through partnerships and collaboration and cooperation.
Thank you so much, Mr. Blair. I think you have answered that question. I would have definitely liked to carry on with this very insightful conversation, but we are running short on time. So I take this opportunity to thank each one of my super panelists. Thank you so much, Mr. Madhavan. Thank you so much, Dr. Mishra. Thank you so much, Dr. Hota. Thank you so much, Mr. Shukla. And obviously, thank you so much, Mr. Blair. It has been a pleasure and privilege to have you guys on my panel. And having learned so much from you, I also would want to continue with this conversation offline. Probably we could do some interesting interviews. Probably we could do some interesting one-on-ones where you could share your viewpoints with the Machinist magazine as well as with our readers and with our audience. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Have a fantastic day ahead. And I hope we are progressing wonderfully towards Atmanirbhar Bharat. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Niranjan. You were a very good moderator. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Stay online for a while. Please stay online.